Alrighty. Hi everyone on Facebook Live. You're listening to Talk Recovery. No, you're watching Talk Recovery Radio. I'm in studio with Miss Frances Stone. And Darren will be here very soon, so we're just getting ready for the show. That's not Darren. And Darren is here. Come on, Darren. Come on. And microphones are going on. I'll be over. Hello, Darren. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, we're good. Oh, that was loud. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. You're listening to 100.5 FM, CFRO, and I'm in studio with my co-host, Miss Frances Stone. Hello, Frances.
Hello.
And Mr. Darren Gaylor.
Should I talk quieter now?
I know.
Hi.
Yes, there you go. Just a little quieter. Yes. Hello, and we've got some guests in the studio that you're going to be meeting very soon. We've got some great topics today. And Talk Recovery Radio comes to you live every Thursday. And we're right from the downtown east side. And always interesting coming into the studio and watching the, what's it called? The Hastings Shuffle or the Hastings Grind or whatever it's called. Just, you know, a lot of people that are having a hard day today. Let's just put it that way. And it's really sad to see. But we're here to talk about recovery and the many pathways to recovery. You can catch us on SoundCloud, iTunes, if you want to hear some past shows. If you have an idea for a future show, you can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/TalkRecoveryVancouver, and you can be part of the show. Darren, you took a cake last week.
I did.
Yay!
Yes. Congratulations, Darren.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Darren. How many years clean?
12.
12 years clean. So addicts can recover, everybody.
Is that a dirty dozen? No,
That's-
dirty dozen is next year.
It's the amount of years that equates to the same number of treatment centers that it took for me to get to
You
my
went to-
spot.
I have a question for you. Did
Yeah.
those 12 treatment centers fail you? Did they not work?
No.
No. Then what was wrong? Why couldn't you get it?
I mean, everybody's got their story. You know, oh, you weren't ready, or you weren't willing, or you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. I mean, let's just face it. To go from addiction to the idea of a different life. Like, I mean, there's a mindset that comes with addiction that you think this is how I function. This is just my life. This is what I got given, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really hard to do anything with a complete disbelief that there's a possibility of anything else. And I mean, I was many examples were that I was just way too young at the time, didn't really have the resiliency or, you know, the integrity to make the changes that were required. And I guess 12 years ago I was a little bit older. I was way more defeated. I had lost, you know, enough to not have many options, right? So, you know, for me, the reduction of options in my life was the start that got me to where I am today. You know, like having you know, very little money to do whatever I wanted and so on and so forth. And
I saw a video of you. Did you see that video?
From back in the day.
Yeah.
From my very first television interview
Oh my
on
gosh,
the news.
seriously, dude, that was crazy. Like, I was like, you actually reminded me of like Tom Cruise in like Cocktail or something. Like, just that, like, I don't know, you don't look anything like him, but just that like kind of like party guy. Like, it was just, yeah, it was neat. Flash from the past.
Yeah, you were sick when you were 12 years ago. You were sick, and like the Darren we see today, you know, is not the Darren that was here 12 years ago. So don't be fooled by, oh, well, he's not a real addict, or, you know, this, you know, he wasn't bad enough. Like, you were a sick individual and all that, and then you did the work and you changed, and recovery is possible. I was at your cake, and it was amazing to see your family and just everybody. You got 2 babies now. Like, life gets good.
I know, it was funny to think, like, you know, my life today That's what I mean. I mean, I couldn't have thought that this was where I would be. You know what I mean? Like at the beginning of all of this, right? So it's a challenge, for anybody, trying to make a big change, like coming out of addiction. You got to remember that, like, that individual does not comprehend a life of anything else, and so you got to get a taste of that. You need the people and the places and the things that will push you, because you probably won't push yourself, to see that it's possible.
Well, you don't even know how to push yourself, and that's why we do this show. We do this show every week because we give you little hints and ideas and concepts that you can use to build your own recovery capital and figure out how you can get yourself into some recovery from mental health and addiction. And we are now going to move into, we got two guests today. One is being a cameraman right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Cameraman. And to all our fans on Facebook, hello. And this is where we move the interview over to Francis and Darren. Francis, who do we got in the studio, and what are we talking about today?
Thanks, Giuseppe. So
You're
today we get to talk recovery about the Isha Judd System. It's a form of meditation focused in love consciousness with facilitator Matt Schmidt. Welcome to Talk Recovery, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit earlier. Do you have any experience with addiction yourself?
Sure. So, I think to varying degrees we all experience different types of addiction. Just in the way that we relate to our reality, the way that, we were talking a little bit before coming to the studio just about different behaviors or beliefs we have as we grow up. And I think that initial separation from feeling good in ourselves creates the desire to find security in something else. So that leads to things like smoking, which was something that I did, and fairly heavy drinking throughout most of my sort of teen years and into my 20s. And so I think for me, that was probably the biggest place where addiction showed up, and also sort of needless worry. So excessive thinking, sort of semi-compulsive, like overthinking, and really choosing for the anxiety button. So that's another form of addiction that I definitely suffered from.
And what set of circumstances or personal experience brought you to discover the Isha Judd System?
Specifically the anxiety. So all of those other things were going on in the background. I mean, I was smoking, I was drinking. There was definitely this feeling of not being at ease inside myself. And I thought that ease was on the outside. So very often, because we're not a company, we're not at home inside ourselves, we're looking on the outside for that security. So I tried pretty much every self-help book in the bookstore. And eventually when Book Warehouse used to be still open on Davie Street, I wandered in there one day and I thought, okay, it's time for something different. And I actually I said a prayer basically the night before, and I said, just anything, I need anything to get me out of this feeling. Because there was such a feeling of insecurity. I thought I would have resolved it by finding the perfect partner, for example. But in that situation, I realized, it's not resolved. What if my partner cheats on me? What if my partner leaves me? So the insecurity was still there. So the next day after asking for that, I found this little book called Why Walk When You Can Fly, which Isha Judd authored, and it described this simple system. And the system is super easy. You focus on being present in the moment and being grateful for that. And we can go into a bit more detail about that, but it changed my life completely. Like in the first sitting, I knew that I was touching something that I needed to really get in touch with, and it was inside.
So is that, I was saying before that I had recently saw Eckhart Tolle on the weekend at the Orpheum, which was great, and he talked about being present, and it was like, yeah, like I've heard this so many times, so it's as though it's the solution. And it's that whole thing of like, why is that so hard for us to just be present?
Yeah. We don't learn to be present. So when we're children, we're present. And if you watch children, they get mad, they're happy, they're innocently connected with you. I used to bring my mom flowers, those things that we do so naturally. And then we start to experience little traumas, and everyone has them. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, and those traumas create separation. And we start to separate from ourselves. We start to separate from ourselves, which ultimately is the moment. So we are that love, we are that connectedness, and we start to forget. And so then we start getting anxious, we start looking. So we create addictions, because the addictions actually are a substitute for that experience of love, for that experience of present moment awareness, for that experience of consciousness that we are.
And so do you believe that comes from the universe or God, or do you believe it comes from self?
That is a very good question. So, I have a teacher, her name's Isha, so I know what her stance on this is. She would say that, we're all one. So when you ask me in my own experience, I have a faith that that's true. It's not entirely my experience yet, but I would say that I have a faith that I am that, right? And so on the other side of all of this, there's union with that realization that I am the one consciousness, but it's not my experience at this point.
So does that mean that you don't believe in higher power or God? Is that what
I would say that I am the higher power.
that you are your own higher power?
But I'm just looking for myself. So it's like, it's an experience of duality. So it's a game. So there is a higher power, but it's me, but I don't know that it's me. So I'm running around chasing my own tail.
Okay, Darren. I feel like you have something to say on that.
No, I'm like, no one's ever really like put it out in that context before, and I'm like, it's interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I believe there's like, that's not my ideology, but there's truth in that. I get what you're saying. It's cool. It's crazy cool.
It's crazy cool.
Yeah.
So it raises the question, does it matter what you call it, right? Which is, because often we fight about, oh, it's this, it's that. It's like, and this, Angus will probably tell you more about this in his experience, but when that experience of being in your heart, we were talking about this earlier, but that's all that matters. And so when you start to be that, it's like, it doesn't really matter whether you call it God, yourself, Buddha, it's less important because that's not real either.
Where do you get community from then in that? Because I think a big piece of why religion exists, why 12-step exists, all that kind of stuff. Like I know for me when I was on my own with my own universe and stuff, it was not healthy. Mm-hmm. So like how do you balance that with sort of like other people's input and that sort of thing? Is there a community with the Isha Judd system?
Well, there's a huge community actually. There's a huge community of practice all over Latin America and throughout the Americas now, in North America, growing a lot in Canada, Australia. So that would be the formal community, and I would say that in my personal experience, the community is everywhere you go, because ultimately everything is you, so you start to relate to everybody with love. So you care. I care about you for no reason, and so there's community automatically because I'm loving myself. It would be irresponsible of me to not care about you, really, if you think about it, because I wouldn't actually be holding space for you. I would just be superficially assuming things about you and moving on with my life, which is how we learn to play this role. We're characters, right? But actually, it's much deeper. We have our character, we have our role, and totally talks about that too. But also, there's much more than that. There's the capacity to grow together, to learn.
What if I'm sick? And what if I'm addicted when I think of somebody that's addicted, I think of somebody that is not there. Like I kind of think it's like a little bit like zombies. Like their spirit's not there, like they're not there. I know when I was in my addiction, I know I was not there. Like it was not me who I am today, it was not that person. So like how do you keep a boundary from yourself? Is that sort of like a self-discipline sort of thing? Like
it's actually quite simple, but it's not the thing that we would normally think. So it's to take everything in for myself. So if I'm working with someone that has addiction, or I have a family member, I have a friend who has addiction, or I'm experiencing that, let's say, quote unquote, the external, the first step in this practice is, how does that make me feel? Because very often we start thinking it's a problem, we have to fix it, we have to change it. And so that's the message we're sending out. But actually, if we stop, we say like, you know what? I'm so disappointed. I had a sister and she's gone. What does that make me feel? Totally traumatized by that experience. Oh, I'm carrying trauma inside myself. I need to heal that first. And as I start to go in, the solution starts to arise from a deeper space. So instead of trying to fix it with my mind, like A, B, C, D, E is broken, I'm going to apply G, F, whatever to fix it. I actually start to let that go, because there's a bit of a place there where that's where we suffer and we waste our resources, because we're spending this sort of mortal, finite energy desperately trying to fix something that can't be fixed that way. So what we have to do is actually let it go, and we have to start to heal ourselves. So we have to heal that violence inside ourselves. We have to heal that separation inside ourselves. And then the energy that results from that starts to be profoundly loving, and solution starts to rise spontaneously. And if you look at it in terms of vibration, so in the Isha system we talk about vibration, that the planet is vibrating at all these different frequencies, right? And collectively we're experiencing a human experience, and individually I'm experiencing a human experience. So what I put into that is ultimately what I'm going to get back out of it. And so if I want to see a unified world, I have to start to focus on unity. And so if I want to see people vibrating in their greatest self, I can't be seeing them as victims. So it's a radical position that no one is a victim. We're all creators. Even the people that are the most addicted, they're all God. We're all God. So it's a perfect creation. But we have to start to find that inside ourselves, right? And that's the journey. It's an inward spiritual journey.
Okay, so My mind is expanding like, as we speak.
Literally right now.
It's like, okay, so I need to go play that back. But I can tell that this is something important, which is really amazing. It's actually interesting because I said before that I'm recently reading Nietzsche, and I'm in a class about existentialism, and I can't say it, but I can go to it. And it is very much the same. Like, his beliefs are very much the same as the system. But then he states that there's the death of God. And so, because he says that God is within ourselves and that we don't need all these other things. Would you agree with that? Is that in line with love consciousness? Like, it seems...
Yes and no. So the word, actually, I was thinking right as you said it, is the word need. I would say it's the death of need. So we equate God with need. I'm insufficient, please help me. So there's an energy there of sort of the child, the paternal. But what's beautiful in there that's true is the surrender. So with God, there's also the surrender. That is true. Like, the surrender is something that we can experience and that we co-create with, or that we create. It's hard to explain, but that ability to let go and trust the flow of life is something we also, I think a lot of people subscribe or ascribe to God.
So is there like a thing where you are sort of surrendering to yourself? Is this idea like that there's sort of a dark side and a light side to yourself, and that you're surrendering, like your light side is surrendering to your dark side? Like, I think the only way to really overcome, which is huge for Nietzsche, is overcoming yourself, is to embrace your dark side, is to be like, yes, that exists. And as long as you're denying that exists, you're in chaos, because you're like, no, that's not me. I'm not dark. And it's like, yeah, you are. So is it like that? Like, are you surrendering?
It's 100% that. So the system, the focus of the system, we have a meditation which uses something called facets. And the facets come from the idea that inside each one of us is a diamond. We're perfect. We're pure love. So by beginning to focus on the facets, we start to elevate our experience of love consciousness, which is unified, just connectedness, flow, joy, unity, abundance, present moment awareness. And as we do that, the junk starts to come out. So, and this is common practice in the Isha system, in the meetings we do in Vancouver, in the centers throughout Latin America, is that we begin to meditate. You will begin to start crying. You will begin to discover, I am so mad at my mom. You will realize, all these things that happen, I abandoned myself over and over and over. And actually, it's really yourself that you feel these frustrations, these sadnesses with, because you just wanted to be you, but you started limiting yourself to please other people. And then that's where the addiction part comes in. And then you start to have this other thing that you're feeding, and you're not feeding your consciousness, you're feeding your addiction. So now the separation starts to be magnified through that. And in a way, it's positive, which what Darren said, when you reach sort of that point where there are no more options, your consciousness starts to wake up, because there's no more options. So of course, and so for some people that starts, it's God, and there's all stages to this, right? It doesn't matter what, as long as you're starting to awaken and connect with your sense of consciousness, your power, your beauty, you're going in the right direction, and it's limitless.
Yeah, and there's this idea. It's almost, I mean, for me, it was an emotional maturing that happened when I realized I was so upset with myself for not being what I was capable of being all along throughout my life, when things happen, when traumas happened, when people did things to me that all my energy it turned into resentment and blame, and you know, and when I realized and matured that was just the worst way to go about that situation, that I disrespected myself by doing all of that. There was just like this internal blaming, but it was also like a sense of 100% pure responsibility, that it's me all along, and that just shifted my perspective. Like, anything that ever happens to me is like, to waste my time blaming somebody else that they did this or they didn't do this or they weren't in the right frame of mind or they were in addiction and they took advantage of me. It's now how I respond to it. It's now like I have that control, and I think that connects to, you know, that higher power being of self and it not being an ego thing. It's a saying that like every individual has the capacity to get through any amount of trauma or a negative impact in their life, right? I mean,
100%.
And it's like, how do you get an individual to understand and believe and believe that when I don't know, I guess there's a philosophy that, you know, it is other people's fault, you know, whether it's, you know, a cultural genocide like that, it's their fault that all of this happened to you, you know, and it's a deep, interesting concept that, you know, I think this is a great form of meditation that's actually getting people to assume that responsibility in their life. So I'm a little bit curious, like, tell us a little bit about Isha Judd.
Yeah, sure. So Isha, so as an example of someone who I think is a really good example of pretty much an ordinary human in one sense. She lost everything. I mean, this part's extreme, but in the late 20s, she lost pretty much everything. So she lost, like, it was 5 or 6 family members in 1 year died. She lost sort of her fortune, the family property. And this was, I guess, for her, a kind of, when you put so much emphasis on external security and external success, like, she's a very strong, powerful person, like, amazing presence. And you can imagine if you're so driven, and then in a way I'm a bit like this too. You're so driven, and then if it doesn't work, and you've been banking on that, it's like, and your support structure is gone, something has to happen, right? So that could go really bad, let's say, or that could cause an awakening, right? So if it could still go further, I don't know. But in her case, she realized, like, if it's not on the outside, I don't know where it is, but there must be some other way to do things. There must be a solution to get me out of this. And the way she expresses is that she started to feel like this sense inside, I have to wake up. And a voice, quite literally from what I understand, in her was saying, like, I have to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. And so she began sort of a quest to wake up. And I think, you know, tried a lot of different things. And in the end, the system is the expression of what woke her up. So it's the focus of the perfection of the present moment and being grateful for that, the perfection of the human experience and offering thanks for that, the perfection of self, and the fact that really everything is one. So we start to focus on that energy. And with the facets, we actually are using sort of the experience of what Isha has tapped into in this stabilized experience of consciousness, which is always growing and expanding. We were talking a bit, you know, why do you like listening to someone like Eckhart Tolle? And it's for the energy. Where humans are drawn to love. 100%. Like, you know, the way, like, butterfly to a flower or bees to flower, we love. And so it's, children are like that too, and it's the beautiful things. So when that consciousness vibrates near us, we automatically want to be near it, and our heart senses that. Does that answer the question a little?
Yeah. So is this woman still alive?
She's alive, yeah, and she's doing amazing things.
Wow. How old is she?
I think probably mid-50s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this woman's created this system of meditation. Like, can you sort of tell us a little bit how it's different than other forms?
Yeah, 100%. So the facets, so the big thing we always stress with this practice is you're never going to understand it intellectually. You have to experience it. It's like anything, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, Eckhart Tolle uses the example of you'll never know what honey, if someone said describe honey, right? It's like, okay, you could describe it, but it's never going to match the tasting it and having the experience of honey, right? The facets are pure love consciousness, okay? They're pure love consciousness. So what does that mean? If you were to surrender to your highest good, even just for a drop or an instant or a glimpse, the facet is like a drop of that. So we start to meditate on that. So it's letting go of whatever doesn't vibrate in that frequency. We begin to vibrate in that frequency. Consequently, the whole world actually is starting to vibrate in that frequency, little by little. And it's happening in different ways around the planet. Mm-hmm. So what I loved about the facets is if you have a really busy mind, which most of us do, the facets will shut your mind up very fast. And we focus on feeling. So we think a facet, we go deep into our heart, and we start to be reacquainted with the physical experience. Okay. What am I feeling right now? And as I do that, that's where the shadow side, quote unquote, starts to be connected with and emptied out, because you realize, man, I'm still, you know, worn out about this thing, or I'm still whatever, and I need to nurture myself and I need to give myself love. So the facet is like, you know, Isha uses the example of the desert. Our hearts are kind of like a desert for a lot of us. And as soon as you start thinking the facets, and I can attest to this because it's a physical experience, your heart, you feel like that rain in the desert. You start to awaken.
And is this, obviously it's guided?
No, it's self-directed.
Okay.
But so what we do, for example, like I teach seminars in Vancouver, and there are seminars taught all over the world. It's self-practice. You do an hour a day. So you use 4 facets, which you can find in Why Walk When You Can Fly, the book. It's also a movie on Netflix, Why Walk When You Can Fly. Or take a seminar. And it's literally, what worked for me was that it was self-practice. So I would sit down and I would do my hour. I was not connected with Isha, with anyone in the community. I just found this book. And I would just start crying. And I would be like, why am I crying? And I would finish and I'd be like, I feel like God. Like, the energy was so profoundly beautiful. It was like, you know, I used to do MDMA a little bit, and I used to say to myself, I wish that I could just feel like this all the time. And now I feel like that all the time. Like it really, I feel like that all the time.
Oh, you just got some new customers.
Yeah. He's harnessed the spiritual MDMA.
Because it is like that. Because I mean, MDMA, I think the reason it's so, I don't want to say addictive but the reason it's so profoundly altering for people, and for some people is addictive, is because it does show us something. And so the point is, okay, you've seen it, but you can't live there with a physical substance. You're going to burn out your body's system. So if you can start to let that go and be open to even deeper experiences just by accompanying yourself, that's kind of how the facet is.
I'm curious about this because I was actually I'm just in this really great zone with my life right now where it's kind of all coming together and it's awesome. And this morning I was waking up and I'm like, yeah, I get to go do the show today and and I like the people I work with and all these kind of things. And I'm like, my life is like a drug. Like, my life is like the best drug. And it's like, I have been meditating vitamins and all these different things and stuff. And I wonder, you know, with people that struggle with addiction, like myself, there is this thing where, you know, we want life to be better. We want to feel better. And it's like, the easy thing to feel better is to grab something, you know, but the work is to learn how to get to this place of like spirituality and meditation. I'm figuring this out as I go along, so that life is kind of almost like you're on drugs, if that makes any sense. Like, it's so good and it feels so good. I wonder that's what we're drawn to about drugs and alcohol and work and sex and all these other crazy things that we're just like want to feel good all the time, but you can actually feel good all the time in your real life.
I'm just going to throw this in there because it seems like a very perfect moment based on that to share this. So to give you an example of the energy that we focus on, and this is the first facet that we actually teach, is praise love for this moment in its perfection. And so we begin to actually surrender to that experience in our heart. And so we go to our heart, we start to feel like, what would that feel like if I really felt praise love for this moment in its perfection? And we're scared actually sometimes to connect with that energy because it means letting go of all the crap that we've been told and we think is true. It's like we live under so much duress, stress, anxiety, and it's moralized and we're taught that it's true. Like, no wonder people are addicted. Like, it's almost the only way to survive, and because we're all innocent inside. So that innocence is lost in all of that. And so the Isha system teaches us, or whatever, but choosing joy it's essentially about choosing joy. So about choosing abundance. And we were just talking about that, spending money on yourself. We learn, a lot of us, oh, well, no, you can't, you have to save that, you got to put it here. Like, okay, so, but don't you deserve to celebrate your life? Don't you deserve, it can also become an addiction. So you got to find that balance. But, you'll know when you start to listen to your heart again, when you start to act from that space,
even I'm just working on my step 4, and I love the steps. Like, I think anybody can benefit from doing the steps. So I just finished my step 4, so maybe that's why I'm like so energetic today. But anyways, and just like looking at my part in these situations and realizing, for me, it feels really weird. Okay, this is maybe a lot of whatever information, but it feels really weird to not have low self-esteem. Like, having low self-esteem, feeling not good enough, feeling not worthy, all those things, that's my normal. And so to get to this place in my recovery where it's like, that's not true. Like, to actually be able to see, like, that's not true. And I've believed that for so long, that something outside of myself would make me good enough. Like, it's so messed up. I'm really enjoying this interview.
Me too.
Yeah, and to give yourself, when you realize that, to give yourself a place of meditation where you can remind yourself constantly, like, give yourself that respect that, that's true, and that I can feel good without the reward system. Because I think that's what happens after being children. We then learn that we can only feel good with sugar or with a good grade or with a mother's praise or with, you know, something from the outside. Like, you can never just feel like amazing joy because you did nothing. and why? Like that's what I've learned again from watching my son, that, you know, he gets all of these feelings and conflicts happen when it's him trying to get something. When he's left alone with a stick and a puddle, like, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like somewhere along the way, yeah, we lost that as adults, as striving to, you know, to have that reward. And I think that's, you know, for me, that was a big thing for addiction, right? Because now I got that control, you know? And yeah, that's, I mean, this is one of those interviews that it's just, it needs so much time, you know, but like you said, it's hard to put it into context. So if anybody's out there listening that's interested in you know, this sense of meditation, check it out. Check out the Isha Judd System meditation. Can you tell us a little bit how they can connect to this?
Sure, yeah. So you can check out ishajudd.com, so ishajudd.com. That's sort of where the foundation is based online. There's also a Facebook page in Vancouver, so you can check that out, and we do seminars here in Vancouver. You can learn from us. And support actually is free after you learn, so it's back to this concept of unity, but we all grow together. So it's something that that's maybe where the community element comes in as well. And definitely a must read, Why Walk When You Can Fly. It's a little harder to get in bookstores these days in Canada, but you can find it on Amazon for fairly cheap. So I would say 100% grab that.
Yeah. Why walk when you can fly? Good question. All right, that was Matt Schmidt, and we have a personal experience with Angus coming up after the first song break. You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, and let's go with, this is a little song called Blue Mind, Alexei Murdoch.
All right, bye everyone.